Hello everyone! Today we're going to talk about the character designs in the recently released game Princess Peach Showtime. A fun little adventure where Peach rescues magical theater performances from the schemes of an evil witch and her minions. The game seems to have a reputation for being pretty simple and easy, and I agree. It's definitely way too easy to be engaging for hardcore gamers. However, hardcore gamers aren't the only people who play video games. Believe it or not, there are other target audiences out there. And regardless of how easy it is, it's still a gorgeous game with beautiful music and intricate settings that probably took years to put together. Now, I do have my own issues with the game that you're going to hear about throughout the video. There are aspects of it that I feel were poorly implemented or not thought through very well, even beyond the designs. The mere fact that the game is less demanding than most, however, is not one of them. As a busy adult who spends a lot more time creating than consuming, I will always defend a game's right to exist even if it doesn't suck up dozens of hours of your time and attention. Something simple that you can just pick up and put down every once in a while is still valid. Anyway, the focus of this video is going to be on the different forms Princess Peach takes throughout the game, which you've probably seen in the promotional art and advertisements. This collection of outfits is clearly one of the game's selling points, so it's important to consider how they look and function to make the best possible impression on the viewer. I'm also going to address the designs of the NPCs and enemies in the game, and talk about how these characters could be improved as well. So, let's get started. This is the base form of Peach in the game. Just her usual design, only instead of wearing her iconic crown, she has her hair tied up in a ponytail with a pink ribbon. Back when this game was first announced and we were all shown this design for the first time, a lot of people were theorizing that this meant the game took place when she was younger, or maybe even before she was a princess, like it was going to cover her origin story or something. And I think it's really funny how far off base we were with those theories, like that wasn't even close to being correct. In reality, she just gets her crown knocked off at the beginning of the plot, and randomly decides to put her hair up, and that's it. The ribbon she wears is created for her by Stella, and represents the power of sparkle, or something. It's a little strange because Stella gives her the ribbon, tells her she now has a new power, and then Peach proceeds to use this power by flinging Stella around, instead of her brand new magic ribbon. And it kinda begs the question of why this ribbon even exists from a game design standpoint. If the ribbon is not an important item in the story or gameplay, why not just have Peach take it out of her pocket or something? Why have Stella magically summon it into existence? If both Stella and this ribbon are technically magic ribbons, why not have Stella be the ribbon? I don't know, it's just kind of a distracting creative decision. However, if we assume that the directors just wanted Peach to have some kind of unique look that people could automatically associate with this game, I think the ribbon is a smart design choice. It's a small change, so she's still recognizable, and this design still feels like a default compared to all the fancy costumes. But it's still very different from how Peach usually looks. It's like giving Mario a baseball cap. Taking a key element away from her design and replacing it with something simple and generic really brings the whole design down to earth, and almost makes you feel like you're looking at a different character. Based on the fan art I've seen, I think this is the most popular Showtime form, and I honestly can't blame people for being obsessed with it because it's gorgeous. I think its greatest strength is how radically different it is from her base form. Like, in the beginning of the game, you have Peach flooping around in her giant ball gown like usual, and then you acquire this form, and all of a sudden that familiar bell shape disappears, and you can actually see her legs. The skin-tight, bright white pants immediately draw your eyes to her legs, and it really highlights this change and brings that wow factor to the design. The fancy coat and hat are very cute, I love the streamlined shapes and subtle texturing, and I love how the primary color scheme seamlessly incorporates her yellow hair with these new colors that she doesn't usually wear. I also love that they change her earrings to red. In character design, changing jewelry colors can be like changing facial features. It brings a different mood to the character's appearance. And in this case, it makes her look more fierce and dynamic. Very fitting for the brave sword fighter. There's a surprising amount of small details in this design to take note of, but my favorite is that you can kinda see echoes of her base form in this design. Like, that bell shape over her lower body is still here, it's just pushed into the background. And she's still wearing a ponytail, it's just moved slightly further down. I think these similarities paired with the dramatic changes make this design feel very strategic as a first form. Like it was expressly created to introduce the viewer to the idea that Our leading lady is going to look very different throughout this game, but at the end of the day, she's still Peach. This design is the first one that I felt kind of meh about. Its construction is fine, she looks like a cute little pastry chef, the braids are adorable, and I especially love her little leather boots, which I would definitely steal for myself if I had the chance. What bugs me about it is the colors. I think all this white paired with the uneven pops of bright color makes her look really washed out. When I look at this design, I can't help but feel like something is missing. If it were up to me, I would simply introduce more bright red accents on the rest of the design. Or I would push the light color scheme all the way and make everything pastels. Having the design half and half like this is what kills it. It's like they're trying to depict her in two different aesthetics at the same time. The innocent cottagecore baker and the solid white professional chef. And there's probably a way to make that combo work, but I don't think this is it. A bit of a weird design. The overall feel of it is perfect, with the icy blues and the gradients and the sparkles and the illusory sheer elements. It definitely checks off all the boxes of archetypal figure skating outfits, while using those elements to sell the wintry vibe. They even changed the shape of her earrings to little ice crystals. I appreciate that. The weirdness, unfortunately, comes from the construction of the outfit itself. It's kind of the opposite of my issues with Patissiere Peach. In that case, the outfit was fine, but the colors were off. Here, the colors are fine, but the outfit is a little off. It just looks bulky. The skirt especially looks really stiff, like it wouldn't actually allow her legs the freedom of movement that we expect from a figure skater. There's a reason real figure skaters don't wear things like this. Ideally, you want a delicate material that swings or flows, so the athlete's movements look graceful and their poses are easy to read. This tulip shape is nice, but it really only looks good when Peach is standing still. When she's moving, you either lose the tulip completely, or it just looks like it's in her way. I'm also pretty disappointed with the shoes. Next to the delicate sparkles and textures on the rest of the outfit, these bright blue, plasticky, basic heels stick out like sore thumbs. There's a slight gradient on her ankles leading down to them, but it's not enough to make them actually blend in. If anything, it just highlights how out of place they feel. If I were to try to fix this design, I'd make the following changes. First of all, I'd make the tulip skirt translucent, so that it feels more delicate and less like a solid object stapled onto her torso. And now you can see the silhouette of her legs moving underneath the skirt, keeping her overall body shape visible and readable. Second of all, I'd slap some boot covers over those skates, so the gradient extends down to her feet. We still have that bright blue color to match her earrings and ground the design, but this way it looks more graceful and less clunky. Third of all, I'd cut her little fabric tail thing into a more obvious feather shape. It's really strangely undefined in the real design, despite the fact that she clearly has a prima ballerina feather motif going on that we could be using here. I think this looks much better than having an amorphous blob following her around. P.S. Despite all my criticisms, I gotta give props to the animators for making Peach's skating animations look unbelievably smooth and pretty. It's hard to believe that these movements are actually user-controlled, like it's mind-boggling. Great work, 10 out of 10. Dashing Thief Peach is one of my favorites. I love her voice lines, and her levels look the most fun. However, I think her design is pretty painfully boring. Every piece of her outfit is incredibly generic, like she's supposed to be a real secret agent who has to blend in, and not a mask-wearing cartoon hero who flies across the moon on a hang glider. Basically, it feels like they just didn't try with this design. I think it's fine for this outfit to be simple, even to the point of being almost all one color. But I think it could look more interesting with just a few small changes. Number 1. Puff out the ascot so it actually looks like a neck accessory and not a flat reddish blob stuck on her chest. Seriously, ascots are cool, and this is the main point of interest on Peach's upper body. I don't know why the character modeler decided to downplay it so hard. Number 2. Add details to the coat. A few coat pockets and some utility pouches for the belt are simple additions that work wonders for the design. And making the color of the belt match the boots helps integrate both accessories into the rest of the outfit. Number 3. Change some of these accent colors. Green earrings are super cute, but they're not doing much here. Making them turquoise to match her eyes or her iconic peach brooch is more eye-catching, with both elements helping to emphasize each other. Making the inside of the cape hot pink instead of scarlet red does a similar thing, helping to bring out the color of her hatband and ascot. Finally, toning down the highlighter yellow of her heels to a more grounded gold makes them feel a lot more like they actually belong here. Again, these are just a few simple changes, but they make the design feel more cohesive and less random. This is my true #1 favorite Showtime form. The detective story levels are super cute and full of personality, and I love Peach's outfit and her little detective job. I have almost no notes on this design, it's pretty perfect. The color scheme is composed of multiple pleasant shades of brown, with well-placed hits of plaid on the cap and capelet. The half-hidden shorts and the solid white tights look surprisingly good, and I love that her hair is totally tucked away underneath the hat. It's basically just gone, almost as if she cut it all off, and it highlights how iconic her bangs are in and of themselves. Like, these face shapes alone are the essence of Peach. The rest is secondary, and this design kinda proves it. The only adjustments I would make are as follows. First of all, I'd add one more button to the coat, and then add some pockets. Coats usually have pockets, and pockets look great. I don't know why these character designers are so allergic to them. Whenever Peach wears a coat in this game, I always feel like it looks weirdly empty for some reason, and it's always because it just doesn't have pockets. Second of all, the boots should be a warmer color. The longer you look at renders of Detective Peach, the more this slightly reddish brown stands out, and seeing as it's the only element of the outfit in this color, I have to wonder why it's even here. I have such a love-hate relationship with this design. First of all, look at this run cycle. Glorious. Every single thing that Mighty Peach does is proof that these animators fully understood the assignment. And the outfit itself is fine. Like, it does give off that sci-fi hero aesthetic successfully, and it doesn't look bad by any means. And yet, at the same time, it's just weirdly disappointing for some reason. It might just be the lack of color and detail. This is the only Showtime form with such a severely limited palette, and the extra plasticky smooth textures are not helping. It makes the design look less like it's streamlined and futuristic, and more like the artist wasn't very familiar with the sci-fi genre, and this is the best they could come up with. Now, I think it's worth mentioning that the in-game model actually looks much better than this render, simply due to the gentler lighting. Oddly enough, when you don't cover that dominant red in so much unnecessary green that it gets washed out, it actually looks dominant, making the lack of color in this design feel much more intentional. So most of what I did with my redesign was just color correcting the render to look more like this, while adding some subtle changes to spruce it up a bit. I started by adding more armor to give Peach a more engaging silhouette. I think shoulders in particular are very important when it comes to armor. They're usually the body part that gets stylized and accentuated the most. And yet, the character designer decided to leave Peach's shoulders completely bare. I bet this is reason #1 for why this design feels underwhelming. Next, as I already mentioned, I brightened up the color palette, adding some yellow value to the highlights of her red armor, and some blue value to the highlights of her black bodysuit. Not only does this add a feeling of depth to the materials, it's an easy way to make the design more colorful while still having it read as monochrome. There are a few other minor changes I made, just to suit my tastes. For instance, I think having her bangs show over her visor looks cuter and friendlier. Also, I thought it was really weird that this is apparently the only Showtime form without a clear Peach brooch equivalent anywhere on it. And so I thought placing this core light on her chest was an easy and obvious way to remedy that. Overall, I think reworking this design was an exercise in making sure its creative choices were communicated clearly, making Peach really look like she's turned into a sci-fi hero, not just cosplaying as the big idea of one. Cowgirl Peach never fails to make me smile. I love the chaps, I love this bandana, this hat is the single most adorable accessory in the entire game. There's just one tiny huge issue with her design, and it's that its color placement and points of interest are aggressively mishandled. It looks like the bright blues and reds are drowning in a sea of tan leather, fighting for attention and losing. These bright parts are the most detailed sections of the design. My eye is drawn to the colors, and it wants to stop and linger on the seams on Peach's shirt and the texture on her jeans. But these details are almost always half hidden by all these bland neutrals, and it's inherently frustrating. You're shown just enough of these points of interest to let you know that they're there, but you're not allowed to actually see them for some reason. There's two ways to handle this issue. Option A is to change the colors of the points of interest to make them less interesting. If you want us to focus on these huge swaths of brown, fine. Make the shirt and pants less eye-catching neutral so that the color scheme supports this. Now, option B, which I prefer, is to change the elements themselves. Give the existing points of interest room to breathe and be seen, and add new points of interest to these otherwise bland elements, so that they're demanding our attention for a reason. Shortening the vest, lengthening the bandana, and adding details to the chaps is an easy way to do this. Not much to say about this design. It's simple, but it works. Mermaid Peach's top is very cute. I love how its coloring mirrors the gradient on her tail and makes the design feel balanced. On that note, the texturing on this model, or at least on these renders, is fantastic. The scales look beautiful, and I love this nacreous effect on her pearl earrings. Finally allowing Peach to let her hair down again for this design is also a smart choice, making her look more naturalistic, like she's truly become a fantasy creature from the deep sea. I'm going to talk about these designs together because frankly, I don't think I know enough about East Asian clothing to give an in-depth critique on either of them alone. I've heard people try to critique designs inspired by other cultures when they don't actually understand what they're talking about, and it can get really cringy, and I would rather not become one of them. So most of what I am going to talk about is color placement, since that's more or less a universal concept. I like Ninja Peach's color scheme. She's really the only Showtime form that tries to lean on green, and this color works well for her. I just wish there was more of it. Like maybe replace some of this black with deep green or turquoise to help the green stand out more. Maybe incorporate these patterns on her scarf into more places to draw the viewer's eye. Maybe give her straw sandals in a golden color that can support the yellow highlights. Or change the colors of some of these accents to help integrate the red sandals, and make the design feel a little more daring. Basically, Ninja Peach is almost perfect. She just needs a little push to make her design feel complete in some way. Now, Kung Fu Peach's colors are actually pretty impressive. Almost every piece of this outfit is its own separate color, but the placement is done so well that it all seamlessly fits together. The darker colors are on her legs to place the emphasis on her torso, which is further highlighted by being the largest area of saturated color. A classic palette arrangement that actually stands out in this instance, due to how fantastical most of the other designs are. I also like that these pale yellow accents serve to mirror the white sections on her legs and help integrate Peach's hair into the look. Like, the designer literally split the difference between the two colors and it worked beautifully. Hats off to them for that. Finally, the minor color details in this design are executed very skillfully as well. The matching belt helps integrate her pants and makes the design feel balanced. The red earrings bring out her red eye makeup, while also lending her that fiery energy, just like Swordfighter Peach. And although her peach brooch is easy to miss in this design, being in such an unusual location, her blue eyes help you to find it, making it feel like a cute little surprise. In conclusion, Kung Fu Peach's outfit might seem plain and unremarkable, but it's actually very well designed, and I appreciate it a lot. It's an excellent example of following the basic rules of character design to create something pleasant and readable. In a word, boring. I didn't even realize these were two separate designs until I saw them listed separately in the costume catalog. The initial transformations are pretty and cool, but it can't hide the fact that there's just nothing to see here. She looks like a discount Rosalina, only bigger and blander. I think the lack of detail on the skirts is what hurts these designs the most, because these skirts are huge. They basically take over Peach's silhouette, dwarfing what's left of her body, giving her the appearance of a Christmas angel. And yet, they're completely empty. No decoration, no detail, just a barely visible texture and some half-hearted ruffles. It's frankly pathetic, and covering her model in eye-blinding sparkle effects can't make up for this. Now this may sound weird, but if I were to fix this, I would start by putting Peach back in her original dress, and build outward from there. Use the sparkle and ribbon motifs to add detail, use the teal in her color scheme to add interest, cut the dress up, push the sections out, and fill in the gaps with more fabric. Basically, make it pretty. Our main character is a cutesy girly princess. Her special final dress should be super pretty. So this would be my version of Super Radiant Peach, and then I would remove some detail for Radiant Peach. That's my usual strategy for tiered designs. Build the specialist looking one first, then subtract for each preceding design. This way you can make sure that the best design actually looks the best, rather than looking over-designed. I'm not afraid to admit that Grape is a really disappointing villain. The reason any of you dislike Princess Peach Showtime is because of how underwhelming she is and how pointless her lackeys feel. I just want you to know that I understand completely and I don't blame you. In fact, I'm beginning to suspect that one of the reasons some people have such a negative opinion of such a gorgeous game is that Mario games usually have more character than this. Like, I'm not all that familiar with Mario, but from the way people talk about the games, it feels like characterization is a huge aspect of what makes them fun. And that's one area where this game really underperforms. For a story with a theater theme, it's kinda ironic that very few of the characters have any sort of theatrical personality. Even Peach herself is little more than an emotionless doll most of the time. But we're here to discuss character design, so let's talk about these characters' designs. First, Stella and the Theets, my first disappointments. The Theets are just kinda bleh. Compared to other NPC type characters like the Toads, they look pretty uninteresting. There's not much about their designs that's actually memorable, besides the fact that they have giant glowing light bulbs for noses. I sympathize with the challenge in designing characters like this. You need them to feel like regular people, so they have to look a little generic, to put more of the emphasis on the clothes and costumes they wear. But since they're the only NPCs we have in this game, you don't want them to be too boring, because then we'll just get tired of looking at them. Which is unfortunately what happened in my opinion. I think their body designs are mostly fine. All I would do to improve them is just enlarge their hands a bit. Then I'd focus on strengthening their costume design. Use more eye-catching color schemes, emphasize their hats and accessories in a more cartoony direction. And most importantly, add more variation. It's bad enough that these stages are populated only by Theets. It's worse when 90% of them are carbon copies of one another. At the very least, we could be palette swapping more of these models. But if time permitted, I would go further and give them additional costumes and hairstyles. Yes, Theets can have hair, but it's used so rarely in their designs that you could easily forget that. Why are we not using it more? Is it that necessary for us to admire their featureless bald heads? If you really want bald characters, the least you could do is make their faces more interesting to look at. Otherwise, for Pete's sake, add something. Now for Stella. I think her design is a bit unpolished. Like, it feels more like a reject design from the development process, not something we should be seeing as a final product. Her face is the biggest issue. It looks almost uncanny, and that's weird considering how diverse character faces can be in this franchise. Almost anything can fit in the Mario universe, but Stella's face just doesn't somehow. I think I would change it to something more simple, maybe remove the unnecessary mouth and put more emphasis on the eyes. If she must have a mouth though, I think just changing its shape would save it. For instance, I kinda like these cutesy proportions I used on the manga version of Stella that I designed. And if she had some of these cartoony, exaggerated expressions as well, it could help her feel more like a character and less like a prop. Because if we're being honest, despite the fact that she talks constantly, it's very easy to forget that she's even in the game. I mean, she doesn't do anything. Let's move on to the Sour Bunch. I'm just gonna come right out and say it, these are not good designs. They do look like evil grapes, I'll give them that, but outside of that, there's no appeal to them at all. Their colors are not interesting, their costumes are not interesting, they have no sense of cohesion or shape language. These guys basically just exist, and it's pretty sad. I mentioned before that this game is very detailed and probably took a long time to make. But as with all commercial art projects, they probably had to cut corners somewhere, and I think this is one of the places where it happened. Which sucks, since I feel antagonists are a large part of what makes a game good. If the enemies you're facing don't feel like they matter, then what are you even playing for, you know? Anyway, it's hard to improve designs like this, since there's so little to work with. I think the easiest place to start with antagonist designs is to make them foils to your protagonist designs. So, Grape should be the equal and opposite of Peach, which we will discuss later, and these minions should probably be the equal and opposite of the Theets. They already have similar round heads, which is good, and I like that they have more clearly defined arms and torsos. Their bodies admittedly look very cute. I think the masks are a good idea too, as a design element that clearly marks them as Grape's evil minions. But like the Theets, I think their clothes need better color work and more expressive construction. I also think it would be cool if their skin came in different colors, Like real grapes can also be greenish or reddish depending on the variety. This would give us more options for making them match the aesthetic of the stages they're in, rather than constantly throwing the same purple grape guys into random outfits that don't always look good on them. Now, before we leave the Sour Bunch, I must admit that I haven't been telling the whole truth. There are a few members of the bunch whose designs I actually love, and it's these guys. They don't actually have proper titles. Hell, I think half of them don't even have proper names. And it's a shame because they rock. They're the only antagonists in this game that I actually care about. They each have their own unique presence and personality, and their designs actually help communicate that to you. I think all they need is to be spruced up a bit. You know, add a little contrasted color schemes here and there. Maybe throw in some extra details. Another thing they need is more screen time, because I repeat, they rock. Why did the directors actually create a decent cast of mid-bosses and then basically ignore them? We could have leaned on them, fleshed them out, built up a tangible rivalry between Peach and the Sour Bunch that would lend some stakes to the gameplay. We could have had it all, but instead we have nothing. Anyway, last but not least, it's time to talk about the illustrious Madame Grape, whose design can only be described as a pitiful cry for help. And I'm not saying that just to be mean. It honestly looks like the character designer was totally lost, drew the first things they could think of, and tried as hard as they could to make the outfit feel interesting despite how blatantly uninspired it is. She is evil, so put her in dark colors. She is a sorceress, so give her a scepter. Grapes are round, so make her hair round. The game is called Showtime, so give her a top hat. You see what I mean? She kinda reminds me of a final boss from the Kirby series, Queen Sectonia. I'm sure you can see the resemblance. But Sectonia is obviously more refined, clearly stylized to look like an insect queen, with distinct details that say specific things about her character. The heart motif that repeats throughout the design represents her obsession with beauty and her desire to be loved. Her ridiculously tiny waist says a similar thing, while combining with the rows of ruffles on her abdomen to resemble the striped body of a wasp. Basically, each aspect of the design not only catches the viewer's eye, but also feels like it has a reason to be here. The details on Grape's design, on the other hand, feel more like meaningless noise. These pleats don't say anything, these weird bumpy edges on her skirt don't say anything, and what even is this going on up here? Like, you have this lobe pattern with triangles tucked underneath, and green beads tacked on, and gold trim, and black rope trim, and it's just a huge, pointless mess. Why is her torso separated from her skirt? It's really hard to see and adds very little to the design. Why is this diamond-shaped gem placed so prominently here? It looks super tacky, and nothing else on her design is shaped like this. So you'd think there'd be a special reason for it to be drawing so much attention. Is it the source of her power, or is it just a pathetic attempt to fill up the space? I could go on, but there's no point. Like I said, it's all just noise added to force the illusion of creativity on a design that doesn't have any. But all is not lost. Although there's nothing I can do to fix Madame Grape's terrible name, at least I can try to fix her terrible design. So before, I said that we should make her the equal and opposite of Peach. And as cute as it would be to make her an evil princess girl with purple hair, I think her phantom, floaty body construction is a more creative decision that we should stick with. It's implied that the true form of Grape is the mask itself, so it makes sense that she doesn't really have a tangible body. She's more like a collection of items that the mask has decided to surround itself with. These items are where we're going to build the resemblance, namely with the dress. I think this part of Peach's dress really feels reminiscent of curtains hanging over a stage. We're definitely going to borrow that for Grape. We're also going to borrow this pinkish color scheme, darkening it to make a sort of wine red palette. I think these colors are much more evocative of the Grape theme we're working with than this generic black and blue thing. Finally, we're going to change Grape's hair and some of her accessories, using them to communicate things about the character rather than just take up space. So, here is my official Madame Grape redesign. As usual, I hope you like it, but even if you don't, I hope you understand the changes I made. My first thought was that she should look more hollow. Like, rather than just subtly imply that she's a theater mask brought to life, commit to that idea and use it to give the design a sense of cohesion and personality. Construct her figure with big shapes, and then poke a bunch of holes in them. Use color contrast and details to highlight how much of this bulk is just unoccupied space. Use the design to communicate to the viewer that this is someone very pretty on the outside, yet empty on the inside. Now, my second thought was that Madame Grape should have some kind of theater-specific characterization, the prima donna, the first lady of the opera. Nowadays, this phrase is used to describe someone self-important and hungry for constant praise. Usually an actress who thinks they're the main character both on and off stage, which obviously makes for a great villain personality. It gave me the idea to make her look much more polished and conventionally attractive, with fashionable clothing and a more detailed hairdo, designed to look like a cascading bunch of grapes. I mean, it's not like she has arms that might clip into it, so why not? Her outfit is now decorated with roses, like those you might throw at the feet of a beloved actor. I also gave her a fan rather than a scepter. Not only is this a little more delicate looking and unique, I think it would really lend to her character acting. You can't just hold a fan in your fist and float around the room. Fans are meant to be fanned. They're meant to be fluttered and waved, opened and closed in response to the wielder's emotions. It's obvious that they had some good 3D animators working on this game, and I wish I could have seen what they might do with an accessory like this. I just know it would have made Madame Grape feel so much more like an interesting character. And speaking of character, in a perfect world, not only would I want Madame Grape to have a more effective design, I would also want her to have a more effective role in the story. It's borderline nonsensical that she's the main antagonist of a game with a theater setting, states explicitly that her goal is to take over the theater and become the star, and yet doesn't even try to take the stage until the last minute. Instead, she spends 90% of the game off-screen and completely invisible, simultaneously undermining her presence as a villain and her motivation as a character. Now, we could change this completely and actually have Grape involve herself with the plays. She could wear different costumes as she plays the boss of each tragedy, and constantly butt heads with Peach as she tries to free the theater from her control. That would be a lot of fun to see and lend some much needed structure to the story. On the other hand, we could play into her absence by simply providing a reason for it, by making her a resentful, bitter antagonist who just wants to tear down the theater's success to soothe her insecurities, while she hides in the wings, too afraid to step on stage for herself. Maybe each time Peach clears another floor of the theater, we could have a brief cutscene from her point of view, as she grumbles about the Theets falling in love with some no-talent princess, not understanding that it's Peach's bravery and sincere heart that shines through on the stage. And maybe in the end, instead of Peach destroying her with a meaningless sparkle beam, the key to defeating Grape would be to invite her onto the stage and give her the confidence to enjoy acting. She and her lackeys could still be antagonists. After all, what's a play without an antagonist? But from here on out, they could contribute to the plays as an actual part of the story, instead of trying to ruin them completely. I think this ending makes much more sense, carries a real message, and fits much better with the wholesome feel the game was going for. Thank you so much for watching, like, subscribe, whatever, and check out my Coffee page gallery to see the finished pictures in these videos. Till next time!